Hello again. Last episode of this series I did a bit of navigation and I didn't do it well, but it's one thing to practice. I'll try and redo the video if you haven't done so already. But this time we're going to do some basic setup of a switch, and it's actually the basic setup for a router as well normally, but I'll separate them. I'll do a switch as a video and then I'll do a video on a router. So let's hop into it. Let's pop into our switch down there. This one's just booted up. Good. And we'll go through some of the stuff that we need to do to put in to do the basic setup of our system. And we'll try and chuck a few errors in there as well. So if you remember, we're in user mode. We should be able to put a password on this via our console and other methods of access, but at the moment we've got no password set on this, and we type enable and we're straight into that as well. So again, no password on that, and we can set up a password for both of these. So this is something we will be doing. There's no information given back to us, so there's a banner message of the day we'll set up, and couple of other things just to get ourselves up to a basic level of config that we're happy with. There's enough security in that, and there's enough information for us to know that it's the correct device that we're playing with. Okay, so let's hop into it. So we're in privilege exec mode at the moment because I've typed enable. So let's do a couple of the basic things first, and then we'll go on to chuck some passwords on. See what the effect is of all those, and then work our way from there. So, configure terminal gets us into our config mode. So we've seen this one before, so we're just going to change the host name, because leaving it on switch, one, is not a good idea. Later on, when we're playing with secure shell, it won't take switch as a name. We have to change the host name. So we'll change our host name. So that's stored in running config. So that's okay. We can live with that. For now, we'll save our startup config a bit later. Let's get our basic stuff in there. So we've seen the effects of that. So there's the effect there. Change this name. Yeah, click back in. Okay, so really, I'm having a good one, aren't I? So let's put in a banner message of the day. Now, banners you can put in a range of different places, but the message of the day is when people either console in or VTY line in, and I'll talk about VTY a bit later because it's either Telnet or Secure Shell, and there's a couple of other protocols for that. And it's a message of the day, so we will tell people primarily some security function. So no that'll do, and that would actually create a banner. Now that's not a legal document. It should have no access allowed unless authorized, not unauthorized. But this is okay. We're just putting it up there to say, yep, here it is. So what we've just typed in there is to say the banner for message of the day, and this is my starting delimiter, and there's my finishing delimiter. So as soon as I start with a squiggly character, it doesn't have to be a hash. We can use, well, actually not the exclamation mark, because that's normally a comment. I believe that's, oh, why did I do that? That's better. I don't even know if those would work, actually. They may do. But whatever one you start with, so any of those, try them. See, that one may not work, but give it a whirl. You can start with an @ instead of that hash, and then you'll finish with an @. So whatever you start with has to be the same type of squiggly character as the finish. So you couldn't put in something like that, because that'll finish that start. So you'll just have no access, and you'll get rid of allowed. So let's just have a look and see how that works actually. One thing you'll notice for navigation, everything is backspace. Okay, so we put our banner in, waffle around it a bit. So let's just see what the effect is. Control Z gets us back to privilege exec mode, and we'll exit privilege exec to get back to user mode and hit enter again. And there's our no access allowed. So there's our banner in there. Done. All good. So let's go back in and start doing other stuff. So we've got our hostname and our banner done. So let's put some passwords on it, because I don't think this is particularly secure if I can just go straight in to user mode, and I can go straight into privilege exec by typing enable, and I've got full access, full admin rights to this whole device. I don't want that. So conft, really shorthand, configure terminal. I want to put passwords onto the system. Now the first one I'm going to put on is my console. So line console 0. Now for years I've just shortened it to line con 0, but it is actually fully worded. It's line console 0. And in there, let's put our question mark. We've got a whole bunch of stuff we can play with, but the ones we want, well, actually we want that one as well. We'll put it in there. I'll talk about it a bit later, but login and password. Logging is something we should put in, so I'll just chuck it in there. Logging synchronous, very quick typing again using the tab. So logging synchronous is a nice thing for us. The reason for that, let's just pop back here. We'll take a connection out and chuck it back in, and you see we get all this information is given to us. So if things are going up and down across your network and you're typing at the same time, then this logging, it's actually a syslog message, is going to go straight over the top of your writing, and it's not very pleasant. So put that in on your lines. Okay, so it's all looking a bit messy at the moment, so let's go back and just actually type the commands in. So line console 0, we've just put in logging synchronous, so do that. It will save you hours of pain. We want to put a password onto this line, and our password is going to be Cisco. Please use Cisco all the time in a learning environment, mostly because if you walk away without cleaning up your device, then at least other people have a fair idea of what the password should be, and you know, we're not wasting time hacking passwords left, right and center. And then we actually type in login. You need to have that login in there and password Cisco. So Control Z, let's have a look at our running config, because that's the stuff we got in RAM, and I'll tab all the way to the bottom. So there's our line con 0. Password is Cisco, logging synchronous, and log in. You don't have to have this one there, but if you want a password on this, then those two is certainly a good option to go for. And there's our banner. Comes up with a Control C as the delimiters, but anyway. So let's have a look at the effect of it all. So let's exit our privilege mode, and we'll hit enter. There's no access allowed, and now we have to type the password for the console. Cisco. Nothing came up. it's actually recorded. It doesn't come up with anything. So hit enter and we've gained access to our user mode. So the console password has just given us access to that. Type enable and we get into privilege exec mode, which is actually the place we want to protect more, but 2 passwords better than 1. Okay, good. There it is, password. So line con 0, password Cisco, and login. Gets us this bit that says type your password in. And we didn't come up. Okay, let's get an enable password in there now. So configure terminal. I'm typing it all different ways today, aren't I? That's the full way. So there's 2 ways we can play with the enable password. Enable password, and we'll do that. Ooh, it's got 3 S's, I didn't want that. So I'm going to type in an enable password and call it class123. So let's Control Z that, exit there, and Cisco gets us into user mode, type enable, and it's asked for a password, so class123, and we're into enable mode. So that's one option of setting up your enable password. The other way is the recommended way, and the reason for it is this. If I show running config, there's my password, it's just sitting there, class123, and the same for the password on my line con 0. If someone obtains our config file, so if we were to save this file to a disk or to a server somewhere and someone was to gain access to it and they found our passwords, then they've got full access to our systems. Not a good thing. So we should try and encrypt or hash our passwords. So we can set up a thing called service password encryption as the command, and that will encrypt all our passwords and everything's great. But actually, just quietly while we're there, I don't think I've covered this yet. I was going to go into conf t, but I mistyped it. Now that little caret tells us where the error is, but actually the error is back here. So it says it's an invalid input, which means it's a typo, and that generally tells us where the error is, but in this case it isn't. So conf t, if you go enable secret class, now this is the preferred method when you're inside a learning environment in general Netacad stuff. This is going to put a password onto the enable or privilege exec access. We're going to make it a secret, which says we're going to use an MD5, I think it is still, hashing algorithm, and that is the actual password. The other option we had that still puts a password onto enable, and that's that password. So that's the one we put in earlier. Now it gets a bit weird. So let's go Control Z. Let's show our running config. And I've done it a bit quickly there, so show running config. Now this is the MD5 hash of the enable password. That's it there. So if class is your password every time, according to packet tracer, that is actually the MD5 hashing algorithm spits out that. If you use rainbow tables, you can hack it, but in our case, at least the layman can't just read that. And if you've got a decent password rather than class, then it'll next be impossible to unravel, because you can't undo MD5 hashes. Okay, so that's kind of encrypted in a way. It's a hash, it's not encrypted, but it's kind of, I don't have access to it. Now, the other thing that we've actually done here, this enable secret has now said never use that. As soon as I've typed enable secret, this class 123 is not applicable, it can't be used. Let's show that. So let's exit, we'll go back, so there's our banner. We're trying to get into user mode, so Cisco to get into our line con 0, our console. Type enable, and I'm going to type Cisco 123, and it doesn't like it. Class 123 would be a better one. Goodness, it's a bit sad, isn't it? I typed the wrong password in. So class 123 is not allowed. Class, which is the enable secret option, does get us in. So that's good news. That's a bit sad, wasn't it? Forgot my own password. Wonder how often that's happened. If I had $1 for every... Anyway. Okay, so show run again. Yeah, this is now pointless, that enable password, so we should get rid of it. So I'm just going to copy that one, because I'm lazy typer. So configure terminal, and let's negate that. So I'll say no and paste it. And it's given us our little caret where the error was. And I've just gone through and said no enable password. Oops. So here's a little kind of cheat we can do sometimes. If I do show run, this is all very short, isn't it? That do option says go back to privilege exec mode, go to this mode that's up here, and run this command. And it does that for us. So we can see now that we've actually got rid of the enabled password class 123. So that's good. Now, the other way to actually hide our passwords, because the line con 0 is still enabled or visible, and we should see that right down the bottom there. There's our password there, and I ran the same command, do show run. So there it is. So I want to hide that in this config file, and I will do it by typing service password, and let's put our question mark right next to it, and dash encryption. So let's do it properly now. Let's go back to privilege exec mode. We put in the command service password encryption. What is the effect of that? If we show our running config now, we've still got our MD5 hash. It's had no effect on our secret, but we've now encrypted the password on our line con 0. So good. So far, so good. Okay, so we've secured our console. We've secured access to our enable up there. We've got a hostname. Go right down again. We've got our banner message of the day. What we should do is let's put an IP address on our switch, because in most larger organizations you don't have 3 switches to play with and they're all within sitting distance of your desk where you can console into them. You've got a switch on every floor in the joint. You could have thousands of switches, and to run around and actually change them and manipulate them and all the rest is a bit tedious. So we actually want to put an IP address on so we can remote into the device, and we remote in on these VTY lines, virtual teletype. So we need to set them up. So let's put an IP address in first, and then we'll go into our lines, and then we'll test and see if we've got telnet access. So telnet is what we're going to use to start with. Very insecure protocol, but it's a start. Okay, so let's put on an address. So again, config terminal. So we're going to config mode, and we haven't really talked about the layers of the OSI model or anything like that yet, but generally switches hang around at layer 2, so they don't have IP addresses. They're not layer 3 switches which do routing function. They do layer 2 function, which is MAC address, and we're going to put an IP address onto the switch, so it will have a bit of layer 3 function in there for us to remote into. We use virtual ports, so the interface VLAN 1 is default in there. So it's a virtual interface, or switch virtual interface, SVI, I think is the term, SVIs, switch virtual interface. So we'll go into interface VLAN 1. Now in previous videos I created interface VLAN 99 and interface VLAN 100. If we do create them, they are on different VLANs, and that starts to get a bit more complex. It's stuff we will cover later. But for us at the moment, everything exists on the switch on VLAN 1, so let's put an IP address onto that VLAN 1, which is part of our network. All our bad green color back there is going to be part of that network. So IP address, young moose gets in the way again. So 192.168.10, 251, and enter. Now that interface should be up already, and other things should be going on, but we need to explain a couple of things in here. If you've never put an IP address in before, there's two components to it. 192.168.10.251 is the actual IP, and then the subnet mask tells us which network we belong to in conjunction with this first 4 octet number. So I've pre-worked out 251 because that's going to be 251. I think that switch up there is 252. This one's going to be 253, and I'm going to have my router at 254. So they need to have different host numbers. If you remember from the first video, I think we had .1 and .2 for our PCs. So that's our address at the moment. Now that should be up. So just in case it's not up as an interface, we'll put no shutdown in there. And should have been up, but anyway. No shutdown says turn on the interface. So good, it's up. So let's control Z, because there's quite a lot of we're actually doing in here, and we'll show our running config again. Show run, and scroll right down, and it says our interface VLAN 1, IP address 192.168.10.251 with that subnet mask. Now that's good. I would like to test that that works before I go too far, so let me ping an address outside this outside of the switch. I want to ping this PC. So if I put my mouse over the PC, its address is 192.168.10.1, and if I put my mouse over the switch, we'd actually get the IP address of VLAN 1 as well, 192.168.10.251. So let's go back into our switch, and now I'm going to type ping 192.168.10.1, and we're going to send information. Okay, so now things are starting to get a bit interesting. Actually, there's a few things running across here. There was success. It says 4 out of 5 of the pings that we sent came back. The first one got lost because we're running ARP, Address Resolution Protocol, which is something you'll have to learn. I'll talk about it later, but at the moment let's just say that that switch needs to know the MAC address of that PC before we can talk with IP addresses. So we need to have the MAC address. But we've got success. If we were to ping again, we'll get 5 out of 5. So it's ARP drops the first one, and then the rest go through. So good. We know that we've configured our IP address correctly. We know that we've got connectivity through our network. We've actually tested the cable, we've tested the PC set up correctly, we've tested the switch is set up correctly for everything local down here, which is good. One other bit of our IP address that we need to sort out is if the switch wants to talk outside of this network, we need a default gateway, which is going to be the router's IP address. So let's put in a default gateway. If you don't understand what I've just said, don't worry too much. These are the commands that you need to know. Later on it'll all become clearer, or less clear as mud. So conft, we're into our config mode. Now it's a different place that we actually put the gateway on this device. So IP default gateway, I've typed it really quickly there, and we put in the address 192.168.10.254 will be the address that I put onto that router. So that's going to be my gateway out of my network, this greeny colored network, into other networks. That router is going to be the gateway, and we pop that in. So for basic switch setting up, this is what we need to put in there. So whether you know it or not, and I've got a cat meowing, I don't know if you can hear in the background, it's obviously hungry, that's needs to be put in there. Okay, so let's just have a look at stuff. We won't be able to ping that one because this is all down. See the little red lights there? Let's just show our running config. So we've got our, well, let's go back to where our host name, enable secret, we got rid of the enable password. We haven't played with any of our ports yet, that's for later. We put an IP address on our virtual switch interface, or switch virtual interface, sorry, SVI. We've put a default gateway to say how to get out of our network. We've put in a banner, and we've put in a password and login on our console, and we set to logging synchronous. So there's a fair bit we've added. Only one more bit to go, and then we'll test things out. The thing we need to go for is this bit. It's got login already, which is cute, but I want to be able to telnet or remote from this PC or that PC and get into this switch. So I need a password on these guys. Okay, so let's put one on. Do you remember how to do it? No, can't hear you. Anyway, we're in we go to config mode again. So, get out. Go config terminal, conft, and now we're going to go onto our line VTY. Now, there is 16 lines, 0 to 15, which means we can have 16 concurrent connections. 16 people at the other end, all typing in and looking at different stuff. So we're going to set them all up the same we did for our console, password Cisco and login. Put a question mark in there. Do we want logging? Yep. Synchronous again. Sorry if it's typing in a bit quick, but logging synchronous is going in there because it's in there. We can put banners onto our lines. It tends not to feature in CCNA, but that's okay. You can put a message of the day banner when people access this. There's other places to play. So the main thing though is that we've got password and login. So if we do show running config, and if that cat is making too much noise and I have to redo this, I'll be very annoyed. So let's have a look right down the bottom. So line BTY04, same for 5 to 15. It's separated because of historical reasons, but there's our password and login. So let's have a look and see if it works. So let's pop onto a PC, go to our command prompt. There's some crazy stuff going on in there. And I'm going to telnet into 192.168.10.251. So I'm going to use this protocol called telnet. And I want to telnet into this IP address. Cool. We've got our banner message of the day, no access allowed. It's asked us for a password. Now the password is for the VTY lines. Cisco, and it won't come up. So good, we've got access to our user mode. Type enable, and class gets us access to switch 1. So from this PC over here, we can remote into different devices. I've remoted into this one. Now the cute thing with telnet is, if I type in 192.168.10.252, and if I've set up that switch correctly, see here I haven't actually typed in telnet. Telnet is the default once you're on a switch. So I'm on switch 1, that switch there, and I've got a different banner. I've used a bit more time and effort in there. Unauthorized access prohibited. User access verification. So again, Cisco, because that's my generic, gets me into user mode. Enable and class is my password to get into my privilege exec mode. So now I'm in switch 2. I came from switch 1. Let's go to switch 3. So telnet 192.168.10.253 should get me down to switch 3 there. So I've got a similar banner. I type in the password for my user mode for switch 3, enable again, and class is to get me into privilege exec mode. So very interesting, isn't it? I was on the C prompt of my PC. I've used telnet as an inbuilt protocol, sorry. I've remoted into this device, which is switch 1. I've followed the banner. I've typed in the correct password for VTY lines and for the enable, and I've got access to privilege exec on switch 1. I then just typed in the IP address of switch 2, which is up here, and it's implied that it's using Telnet. It only works with Telnet if you've got it enabled. And I did the same thing. There's my banner for switch 2, and off it goes. Then I did the same, pretty much, but slightly different. I typed in Telnet 192.168.10.253, and I've now got access across my switches. I'm on switch 3, which is this geezer down the bottom right here. If I exit switch 3, I go back to switch 2. And if I exit switch 2, I go back to switch 1. And if I exit switch 1, I should go back to the C prompt of my PC. So now I don't have to run around to these devices with a console cable. I can remote into them. So if I hit the up arrow there, I go 253. I get my banner, Cisco, and enable, and class, and I'm in. And I get out by typing exit, and I'm back to my prompt on my PC. So, one more thing to do on our devices. At least on this device. So I'm going back this way. It seems a bit daft considering I'm just there, but let's just hop into here. Now, if I type in something like that and hit enter, I've got a typo. And what this device is now trying to do is to look for a DNS server to resolve that into an IP address. And I don't want to sit here and wait too long. In Packet Tracer, I'm happy. If I hold Control, Shift, and type the number 6 in, it stops. But on physical devices, you can't do that. You've got to sit there for a while it has a crack at trying to find the DNS server that doesn't exist on our network, and it is painful. So what we need to do is get rid of the option. So configure terminal, conf t, we type no IP domain. Oh, is it there? Let's put a question mark right on domain. Yeah, we're pretty close. I don't want that one. I don't want that one. I want that one. And I can finish it by typing there. So no IP domain lookup says, if I type that in, I don't care. It's unknown command or computer name, unable to find the computer address, and it dumps it quickly. Really handy again. Okay. So we've covered a fair bit in that. So let's just show our running config again. And I'll just hit the space bar right down to the bottom and then scroll. We'll work our way up from the bottom. Okay, line VTY. For Telnet to work, we need to have a login and a password there. You actually also need to have the enable set. Whether it's enable secret or enable password, that has to be set for you to use Telnet. So Telnet is in there by default. Sometimes it actually won't work. There's another thing we have to add. I'll do that to the router later on, but at the moment that's good. Okay, for our console to work, we put a password in and you need login. We've got logging synchronous there so that we don't have logging pop in and mess up our typing later on. But at least login and a password, otherwise it won't work. try it without. We put in service password encryption, and it's encrypted all our passwords down here. So any passwords we've set have been encrypted. We put in a banner message of the day on this one, which is no access allowed. I'm going to change it to the other ones later, but it's there for now. For our IP address and for our networking side of it, I put in an IP address on this interface, this switch virtual interface, and it's on 192.168.10.251 with that subnet mask there. I also put in a gateway address to say to get out of my network, that whole lot there, I need to go to this router to get out. So that's been added in as well. So there's a fair bit in there that I've added. Host name up there and our enable secret. I've also got no IP domain lookup to stop typos. So at the moment this is all in my running config. I don't have it in a startup config, so I need to save it. So copy running config to startup config is the full command. Yes, we want that in. Something I never said before, is that the name that I want in there? Yes, I'm happy with that. I can save it as a different one. Hit enter. So yeah, all good. So now we've saved our config files, we can reload and everything will be stored in there. But that is the basic config for a switch. The router won't be too different. I'll run through a bit quicker when I do the router. The main difference is that stuff there. We don't have a default gateway for a router, and we don't have a virtual interface. We actually have physical interfaces which we configure. But everything else will be pretty much the same as far as what we've typed in. So good, thank you for that. Hopefully it wasn't too long.